A lot of people have questions about how temperature of the Tesla Model 3 battery affects acceleration. This video will explain why monitoring the battery temperature and the battery max discharge value are so critical to achieving the maximum acceleration for that car and any EV for that matter. Every Tesla EV has a max discharge value, that is the power output value in kilowatts that limits the maximum power the car can produce. The highest max discharge value has always been 462 kilowatts, 628 metric horsepower, or 620 US horsepower for US-based Model 3 performance cars with the 82.1 kilowatt-hour Panasonic battery, and approximately 415 kilowatts, 564 metric horsepower, or 557 US horsepower for Model 3 performance cars with the LG battery in the rest of the world. That max discharge value has been a theoretical value in the past. Even if you had 462 kilowatt max discharge value coming off of a 100% state of charge supercharging session, the old Model 3 performance in the US would never go past 436 kilowatts, 593 metric horsepower, or 585 US horsepower of real-time battery output. However, Tesla underreports how much power their cars can actually output. The Highland Model 3 Performance can output 457 kilowatts, 621 metric horsepower, or 613 US horsepower in real-time power at 47 miles per hour. That far exceeds the 510 horsepower they state for the car, but it perfectly lines up with the fact that the car can easily run 10/8 in the quarter mile without any weight reductions. So why would Tesla underrate it so much? The answer is that the battery temperature affects the performance so much that they have to rate the car without any of the battery optimizations. Most people way underestimate how much battery temperature matters for straight line performance. It basically is the only thing that matters. State of charge is almost irrelevant compared to how much battery temperature can affect the performance. All of the car review sites claim that it doesn't matter whether you run in track mode or insane mode for straight line acceleration. However, they are completely wrong on this. The issue is that they are looking at it like it's an ICE car. With an ICE car, things happen immediately when you press a button. For instance, if you click the sport mode button in an ICE car, it immediately remaps the throttle pedal and adjusts the car's engine parameters. You can immediately achieve max performance after pressing the button. It doesn't work that way in an EV. Because an EV's acceleration is affected so much by the battery temperature, it takes time for max performance to be achieved after pressing the button. I'm not going to argue whether that is good or not. I'm just trying to get everyone to understand that you can't just press a button and immediately get max performance with an EV. It can take up to 15 minutes for the Model 3 Performance to optimize the battery temperature. However, Car and Driver said the Hyundai Ioniq 5N can take as much as 20 minutes to heat the battery for max performance. From my experience testing my 2024 Model 3 Performance, it doesn't appear that any of the review sites have actually launched the car with any more than about 570 metric horsepower max discharge value. That is a lot lower than optimal, and typically that would produce an 11.0 second time at best. With an optimized battery, you could be as much as 1/4 of a second quicker. There are some things you can do to reduce that time for the Tesla though. If you navigate to a supercharger, it will begin heating the battery, but not all superchargers are equal. For instance, we have an older 75 kilowatt supercharger close to me. When I navigate to that supercharger, it doesn't heat to the same 120 plus degrees Fahrenheit that I see with the newer 250 kilowatt superchargers. Make sure you select a 250 kilowatt supercharger when you are trying to heat the battery rapidly. Also, preconditioning when attached to a level 2 charger doesn't heat the battery anywhere close to what it needs to be optimized. Typically, level 2 preconditioning, it just heats the battery to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit for maximum efficiency instead of the 135 plus degrees Fahrenheit that gives you maximum acceleration and charging speeds. I also noticed that the preconditioning for supercharging can draw up to 11 kilowatts or about 15 horsepower while heating up the battery. If you hit 11 kilowatts, it will heat the battery up much quicker than it does when power is reduced. What I found is that if I put the car in drive, the power would drop to about half of what it is when I was sitting in park with my foot on the brake. I could only achieve the maximum heating rate when I was seated in the driver's seat with my foot on the brake and the car in park instead of drive. The car will still heat the battery if you need to drive it and precondition at the same time. However, the fastest way to heat the car up is to have your foot on the brake and be in park. If you get out of the car, it will shut off preconditioning. I believe this is a safety feature. I have not found a way to heat the battery for optimal acceleration without being physically seated in the driver's seat. I think the car intentionally prevents you from doing this. If anyone knows a way around this, please leave a comment below. Also, starting temperature affects the time it takes to get to optimal temperatures. If you start at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, it will take a lot longer than if you start at over 100 degrees. Track mode will always try to cool the battery. Sometimes it will even cool the battery after you have exited the car. If you put the car in track mode to do donuts and then you let it sit before you do acceleration tests, you have absolutely destroyed the performance of the car. The battery will be cold and will lose so much power above 40 miles per hour because of the max discharge value being so low. You must heat the battery back up after you use track mode to get that max discharge value back up to optimal levels. This is what most reviewers are getting wrong. They use track mode and then they expect insane mode to magically optimize the car immediately after they put it into that mode. They can switch back and forth between track mode and insane mode and it'll produce the same or at least similar times. However, that isn't the optimal time. If they navigate to a supercharger, it will heat the battery up and make the car significantly quicker. So you might be wondering how much of a difference a cold battery makes versus a fully optimized battery. Here is an example where I preconditioned for efficiency and charged to 100% on a level 2 charger for a long drive I was doing. Notice that my max discharge value is only 534 metric horsepower even at 100% state of charge and 64.8 degrees Fahrenheit. You might think that is good since it exceeds the 510 horsepower the car is rated for. However, when I supercharge to 100%, I get 627 metric horsepower max discharge value. That is a 93 horsepower difference. That is absolutely massive. That is well over a half of a second difference in the quarter mile time. I can't stress enough how important heat in the battery is for straight line acceleration. State of charge is almost irrelevant compared to heat in the battery. I was able to achieve 564 metric horsepower max discharge value at only 50% state of charge and almost 133 degrees Fahrenheit. That is 30 more horsepower than with a 100% state of charge and 65 degree battery. I could easily beat a 100% state of charge car with a 50% state of charge car if the battery temperatures are that far apart. Please note that so far insane mode has never actually warmed up the battery for me. I only drive my car in insane mode and I monitor temperatures every time I drive. I live in the Northeast now and insane mode doesn't seem to affect battery temperature at all. I was able to run 5 consecutive 10.8 at 125 plus miles per hour quarter mile passes simply by heating the battery for about 15 minutes at the track last weekend. I only preconditioned once and my last run was a 10.89 at 125 miles per hour with only 86% state of charge and no weight reductions. My max discharge value was 606 metric horsepower, and that was enough to still run 10.8 seconds for the quarter mile on all season tires. Ironically, I lost 2 consecutive passes to an Infiniti Q50 that was running low 10s to my 10.8 second passes. So far, my 2024 Model 3 Performance has run 24 separate quarter mile passes below 10.9 seconds at the track since I got it in June. The fastest it has run at stock weight is 10.75 at 126 plus miles per hour. I was able to do a 10.63 at 127.66 miles per hour with the passenger seats taken out. If you aren't getting the numbers I am getting, it is because you aren't heating the battery properly. That is it. There is no magic to it. I simply navigate to a supercharger for up to 15 minutes while I'm stopped and waiting in line in the pits. If I have over 605 metric horsepower max discharge value, then I will run below 10.9 seconds for the quarter mile regardless of the state of charge. You really need to monitor the max discharge value to know whether you are getting max performance or not. My whole goal with this video is to simply show everyone exactly how I run the times that my car runs. My hope is that it will help some people to get the most out of their car if that's what they desire. Let's be honest, even with a cold battery, the US Model 3 Performance is a low 11-second quarter mile car. That is plenty fast for most people. However, if you truly want to get the optimal straight line performance out of the car, you really need to put your foot on the brake, put it in park, and then navigate to a supercharger for up to 15 minutes in insane mode. That works for me every single time. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe.